You know, I've tried really hard to figure out why I was obsessed with a movie about BDSM, and turns out it's just because I'm so attracted to the gender reversal represented in it. I promise it's not the BDSM. So if you watch my channel, you know that I mostly watch Thai dramas, though occasionally, if a Korean drama is popular enough or personally recommended to me by a friend, I'll watch those too. For Love and Leashes though, I was surprised to see Kat Black, a YouTuber I love, talking about it as the best BDSM movie she'd seen. And the way she summarized it was enough for me to pause the video, go watch the movie, and come back to finish her video. And here's the thing. I loved this movie so much that I rewatched it the next day, then a week later, then a month later, and I recently rewatched it on my moving abroad party with my best friend. So needless to say, it's kind of my favorite movie now. And while Kat Black focused on the BDSM aspect, I personally focused more on the rest, notably the romance and the characters. Because I absolutely love the depiction of gender in that movie, and this is what I want to talk about today. Ji-woo. So in this movie, gender it really isn't portrayed in a way that I've seen before from an Asian romance, at least without being a gimmick of some sorts. Let's start with the main protagonist of the story, Ji-woo. She's introduced in a scene at work where she gets clearly attacked by her sexist boss, who already insists on her being not nice and polite enough. And it's true that we see Ji-woo being on the colder, more independent and direct side, which are not qualities typically associated with femininity. In the next scene, when Ji-woo expresses her interest in Ji-hoo, the male lead, her colleague tells her that she should do something about the look in her eyes if she wants to find a guy, and is surprised to learn that Ji-woo is interested in him and doesn't even blush around him. Once again, we can see that 1. Ji-woo is not performing femininity as she supposedly should, and 2. She should remedy to that in order to find a guy, which seems to be the goal of her life according to everyone around her. Right after that, we get a scene of Ji-woo with her mother, who only reinforces that and states that men are apparently the hunters in the relationship, while women are the prey. And once again, Ji-woo doesn't fit that narrative at all. In the first 8 minutes of the movie, it re-establishes gender expectations that we all know to be true, especially for women, which will be challenged later in the movie. We can see Ji-woo herself be ashamed of the way she is when she talks to Ji-hoo near the hospital, and confides being really insecure about it. We can tell it's clearly something that has been repeated to her whole life, making it a huge insecurity for her. But for once, we can see that Ji-hoo is actually attracted to that aspect of her, even mistaking her for a BDSM dominant. The man that she's been told her whole life wouldn't want her because of that, actually loves that about her. And I think that's what attracts Ji-woo to being a dom. Because not only does being a woman dominant already subverts the gender roles that she's never subscribed to in the first place, on top of her being incapable of being a submissive like shown in this scene, but also because Ji-hoo wants her to do what she's been told over and over again she couldn't and shouldn't do, and he likes her more for it. I also want to mention that this is one of the very rare Asian media, or at least mainstream Asian media, that represents women's sexual desires and pleasure, which felt genuinely groundbreaking to me. Which is why, despite having no sex scene in it, it's still quite an erotic movie, showing Ji-woo being turned on by Ji-hoo's tongue tickling her hand, being disappointed when he says that he doesn't want to have sex with her, which would usually be portrayed as a man's reaction, or even having a scene that clearly alludes to her rubbing one out in bed, or this scene as well. It's probably because this movie is directed and written by a woman, but it was frankly something never seen before in Asian media for me, so I absolutely loved it. And I personally don't think women having desires and being sexual challenges gender roles, but sadly that's not the case for our society as a whole, for which sex should only be something women put through for their man's pleasure. So in that aspect, the show is quite revolutionary as well, especially since it shows its female characters' sexual desires even more than their male counterparts. And in the end, Ji-woo doesn't need to change anything about herself to get a man like she was previously told. In fact, she only grows to be more dominant as she comes to enjoy BDSM more and more. I found her to be such a relatable character who does not only have to deal with sexism at work, which is sadly a common reality for women, but also struggle to accept her own different take on femininity. And the thing with gender is that we're all failing to perform it in some areas of our lives, because the box we have to fit in is so tiny, and we are so broad and complex as human beings. Seeing Ji-woo finally accept who she is and embrace her own kind of femininity was beautiful, and I think it reflected a lot of women's journey with femininity, including my own. Ji-woo. Now, contrarily to Ji-woo, who fails to perform femininity correctly, Ji-woo deals with another kind of subverting gender expectations. On the outside, he is masculine in every way, be it physically being tall and manly, or in terms of the personality he shows others, strong and not afraid to be assertive. He sort of represents the perfect guy that every girl is in love with, but on the inside, he is the complete opposite of the image he shows to others. It's in his desire to be dominated by a woman that Ji-woo does not perform masculinity well according to our patriarchal society. But contrarily to Ji-woo, he has that part of himself, and it's actually why he likes Ji-woo so much, because unlike him, she's always herself. Ji-woo explains it himself that the reason he's into BDSM is that he's always felt the need to prove his worth and not let others walk all over him, becoming quite assertive and a more dominant presence in the workplace. BDSM allows him to throw that whole image of himself away and peel back to what he really wants. And with Ji-woo, he is a completely different person, acting like a puppy, which the actor has said himself the director instructed him to do. And also that's made very clear by Ji-woo's enjoyment of puppy play, which everyone who watched the movie loves to hate on, whereas personally I'm more impressed by how realistic his box were. So Ji-woo is more childish when he's in BDSM mode, which is not inherently about reversing gender roles. We all know that men are allowed to be far more immature than women and still be considered professional and good at what they do. But I'd say Ji-woo pushes the button a little too far because he's really childish. And also once again he likes to be dominated by women. There's this idea that a masculine man does have a more childish and funny aspect to him, but is still a relatively serious and logical-oriented person, which is not the case for Ji-woo. As we see, in every instance he acts impulsively and is a highly emotional person. Him crying after he thinks Ji-woo dislikes him is a highly uncharacteristic scene to give to a male lead, when usually they are allowed great expressions of sadness only in extremely rare scenes. Whereas here, throughout the whole movie, Ji-woo is built up as the more logical and insensitive one, while Ji-woo is definitely the more emotional, making him more traditionally feminine in his expression of emotions. I also want to talk about another aspect that really touched me as a bisexual woman, though I'm a bit hesitant to bring this up because sadly some people always think that bringing up queerness is pushing the gay agenda or being obsessed with everyone being gay, which is just a flat out lie. I think anyone in the LGBTQ+ community will have found some parallels between Ji-woo's shame of liking BDSM and the lack of acceptance he gets for it and being queer. And obviously I'm not saying Ji-woo himself is LGBTQ+. In fact, I found it very important to have a straight male lead like him. But I'm just saying that the scenes between him and his ex-girlfriend, talking about how he wasn't accepted, clearly facing some backlash for liking BDSM, the girlfriend asking him if he really enjoyed the things they did together or if it was all fake. Come on, this is so queer adjacent. And I think this part of Ji-woo's story is very important as well to show that he faces something a conforming straight man usually wouldn't. For me, the scene before the last play in particular shows how much the roles are reversed. Ji-woo is the one cooking, when usually the woman would be seen cooking in most media, even still today in 2022, whereas Ji-woo is the one prepping the rope for their play, doing manual labor, which is something associated with men. And what I love about this scene is that it feels so revolutionary just watching it, while it still shows the care both characters have for each other, both preparing for the night in different but valuable ways. Yet if the roles had fit gender expectations, this scene would have been a lot less notable. And in fact, the fact that the gender roles are reversed is what makes Love and Leashes such a great movie. To conclude, Love and Leashes is not only a very solid rom-com and a quite applauded introduction to BDSM for its audience, but it's also kind of a one-of-a-kind movie. I tried searching similar movies to this one to see if there were other series on female dominance, but the results were sparse. And it really shows that Love and Leashes was a much needed movie that was written really well in my opinion, had pretty amazing performances, and challenged gender roles like not many movies have before. Even the side characters like Ji-woo's best friend, who is presented as quite assertive in her daily life while being submissive and hooking up with strangers, really challenge usual tropes in Asian media with understanding instead of shame. So anyways, I love this movie and I highly encourage everyone to go watch it. I'll see you next time and I hope you have a great day.